1/3 when the telegram came from the dusty town of Red Hollow, young rancher Clay Monroe didn't think much of it at first. He'd been drifting across the frontier, chasing work, chasing hope, and mostly running from ghosts he didn't dare name. But the words in that yellowed telegram froze him cold: "Your grandfather's estate awaits your claim. Monroe Ranch, Red Hollow County." Clay hadn't seen the old man in 20 years, not since his parents had died and the old rancher sent him away to an orphanage in Santa Fe. Now the inheritance pulled him back like a curse tied to blood. Riding up to the land, Clay found the place hauntingly still, miles of cracked earth, dead mesquite trees, and a silence that didn't belong to nature. The old Monroe Ranch stood at the edge of a canyon where no birds sang. The main house leaned against time itself, its porch swaying with every wind gust. But what chilled Clay most was the blackened oak tree behind the barn. 8 ropes still hung from its limbs, creaking softly in the wind like whispering souls. The town sheriff, a man named Briggs, met Clay that night at the saloon. "You sure you want that land, boy?" he asked, tipping his hat back with wary eyes. "Monroe's land's got a story. Folks say it's cursed. 8 widows died there, hung themselves one after another, each one livin' on that ranch after your granddaddy's wives passed." Clay frowned, confused. "My granddad was married 8 times? Briggs nodded slowly. "And each wife ended up swingin' from that oak. People say he buried 'em together up on Widow Hill. Some say he killed 'em. Some say the land itself took 'em." That night, Clay couldn't sleep. The wind kept whispering through the cracks of the house, and the floorboards creaked like footsteps. He walked the halls of the home, and every painting seemed to watch him, portraits of his grandfather and a series of women whose eyes seemed to follow him down the corridor. He found an old ledger on the desk, filled with names and dates. Beside each woman's name, his grandfather had written strange words like atonement, sin, debt paid. Then, at the end of the book, Clay found one last entry written in a shaking hand: "The last widow knows the truth. The land must not be sold." The next day, Clay met an old Apache woman who lived at the edge of the canyon. She called herself Mother Gray. When he mentioned the ranch, her eyes turned dark as midnight. "Your grandfather broke the circle," she whispered. "He took land that wasn't his. Blood land. The women, they were the keepers. He used them. Their spirits now hunger for peace, but no one listens." Clay didn't believe in curses, but he couldn't deny what he felt: something alive in the soil, breathing beneath his boots. That night, the oak tree creaked louder than ever, and when Clay looked out his window, he swore he saw 8 shadowed figures swaying gently in the moonlight. The next morning, he found something new. In the dirt behind the barn, hoof prints. "Land listens to care. Like people." Those words lingered in his mind for days. The neighbors began whispering. Some said Eli was a fool for buying an Indian. Others swore the Apache woman had bewitched him, that her kind carried desert spirits in their blood. But Eli didn't care. For the first time in years, he wasn't lonely. One evening, as the sun burned low and the horizon glowed red, Eli found Nita sitting by the corral, singing softly in her language. The tune was mournful yet beautiful. When he asked what it meant, she said, "It is for those we lost, so they don't forget us." He realized then that pain had carved both their hearts the same way, through loss. That night, they shared stories under the stars, his of failed dreams and hers of a husband and child killed during the wars. When the firelight touched her face, Eli saw something he hadn't seen before: peace. And in that moment, something shifted between them. 2 broken souls began to heal each other, one heartbeat at a time. But not everyone wanted to see peace. The drunk who'd sold Nita came back weeks later, demanding she be returned. "She's mine," he roared, waving his pistol. "You can't just take my property." Eli stood between them, calm but firm. "She's no man's property. Least of all yours." The drunk laughed. "You think you can take an Apache woman and make her your wife? Folks'll burn your ranch down for less." Eli didn't back down. The drunk fired, grazing Eli's arm, but before he could shoot again, Nita struck him down with a shovel, her eyes blazing with fury. She looked at Eli and said, "Now, you my people. I protect you. That night, Eli realized what he'd truly bought wasn't a servant, it was redemption. Months passed, and life at Dry Creek changed in ways no one could have imagined. The ranch that once seemed doomed now thrived. Cattle multiplied, crops grew, and word spread across Silver Mesa that Eli Turner's cursed land had turned fertile overnight. Some said it was luck, others whispered it was Apache magic. But Eli knew the truth, it was Nita. Her quiet strength, her relentless work, her prayers to the spirits, and her belief that broken things could live again had transformed everything. Their bond deepened. They weren't husband and wife by law, but by the rhythm of shared labor, laughter, and long nights by the fire, they became something stronger, two souls bound by destiny. Eli often found himself watching her as she worked, her dark hair glistening in the sunlight, her eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond words. He began teaching her to read English, she taught him to listen to the wind. Slowly, they built something neither of them had dared dream of, a home. But their peace was tested again when drought struck the valley. The rivers dried, cattle died, and the neighboring ranchers blamed Eli's Apache woman, calling her a curse. One night, a group of men rode to Dry Creek, torches in hand, shouting for her to leave. Eli faced them alone. "You want her." He wind howled across the New Mexico plains, sweeping dust like whispers of lost souls. Under that sun-cracked sky lived Eli Turner, a rancher whose life had been nothing but hard labor, bad luck, and broken dreams. His ranch, Dry Creek, was barely more than a few acres of dying grass and a handful of cattle too weak to graze. Eli was known in the nearby town of Silver Mesa as the poor rancher, a man cursed by drought, debt, and solitude. Every coin he earned came from sweat and suffering, and every night he sat alone by a dying fire, haunted by memories of a wife who'd died giving birth to a stillborn son. He had long stopped believing life had anything good left to offer him. One late evening, Eli rode into Silver Mesa for supplies, only to find the small town buzzing with drunken laughter and shouting. The source was the saloon filled with ranch hands, gamblers, and drifters. But what caught Eli's eye wasn't the noise, it was the sight of an Apache woman, bound by rope and standing beside a man whose eyes were red from whiskey. "Ain't she something?" the drunk man slurred. "Got her from the reservation 2 years back. Calls herself Nita. I'm sellin' her cheap. Useless as a mule and twice as stubborn." The saloon erupted in laughter, but Eli didn't join in. There was something in the woman's eyes, defiance, pain, and a haunting quiet strength. She wasn't a slave in her heart, she was a storm that had merely been chained. "How much?" Eli asked, his voice cutting through the room. The laughter died. The drunk husband squinted, half surprised. "You serious, Turner? She ain't worth the rope that ties her. But hell, give me $30, and she's yours." $30. That was all Eli had to last the month. But something deep inside him, perhaps the ghost of his lost humanity, made him reach into his coat and drop the coins on the table. "Deal," he said simply. The drunk spat on his hand and sealed the sale. And just like that, the poor rancher walked out of the saloon with an Apache widow whose silence spoke louder than any words. The ride home was wordless. Nita sat behind him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. When they reached Dry Creek, she looked at the barren land and broken fences without expression. Eli untied her hands and said, "You're free to leave, if you want. I won't stop you." She turned slowly, her face unreadable. "No place to go," she said quietly. "You buy me. Now I work." And work she did. From dawn till dusk, she mended fences, carried water, and tended to the cattle. Her hands were scarred but steady. She spoke little, yet her presence filled the silence that had once crushed Eli's spirit. Within weeks, Dry Creek began to look alive again, the soil turned dark after a rare rain, the animals grew stronger, and even the wind seemed less cruel. One morning, as Eli watched her from the porch, he noticed something he hadn't seen in years, a flicker of hope. When he thanked her for her work, she only nodded and said,